In 1804, the Lewis and Clark expedition officially began as a carefully planned journey organized by the United States government. The main purpose was to explore the vast western territory that the United States had recently acquired through the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. This land deal, made between the United States and France, had nearly doubled the size of the country. However, most Americans at the time knew very little about what lay in the newly purchased territory. President Thomas Jefferson, who strongly supported scientific exploration and territorial expansion, wanted to gather exact information about the geography, natural resources, plant and animal life, river systems, possible trade routes, and the Native American tribes who lived in the area. He believed that this information would help the country understand its new land, make future decisions about it, and possibly open up trade routes, especially a water route to the Pacific Ocean if one existed. Jefferson selected Meriwether Lewis to lead the expedition. Lewis was his personal secretary and a former captain in the U.S. Army. Jefferson trusted him because he was highly disciplined, intelligent, and curious about science and nature. Lewis, in turn, chose William Clark as his co-leader. Clark had been his superior officer in the Army and was known for his strong leadership and mapping skills. Even though Clark was technically given a lower rank than Lewis on paper, the two men agreed to share leadership equally during the journey. This joint leadership became one of the reasons why the expedition functioned well under pressure and difficult conditions. Before they began the journey, Lewis received extensive training in scientific methods, medicine, and navigation. Jefferson arranged for him to study with experts in fields such as astronomy, botany, zoology, and mapmaking. These skills were necessary for collecting useful data and making accurate maps. Lewis also purchased and prepared supplies including weapons, medicine, notebooks, surveying instruments, and gifts to present to Native American leaders they would meet along the way. These gifts, such as peace medals with Jefferson's image, American flags, colorful beads, cloth, mirrors, knives, and tobacco, were intended as peace offerings and symbols of goodwill from the United States. The expedition team was called the Corps of Discovery. It included about 30 to 40 men, most of them soldiers. Some were skilled hunters, blacksmiths, carpenters, and interpreters. The group left from Camp Du Bois, a winter camp they had built near the confluence of the Missouri and Mississippi rivers. On May 14, 1804, they officially set out up the Missouri River from a spot near St. Louis, which at the time was one of the last established settlements before the frontier. The expedition moved by keelboat and smaller pirogues. They traveled upstream against the current, which made progress slow and physically demanding. They had to row, pole, and sometimes drag their boats using ropes from the shore. Their goal was to reach the Rocky Mountains and eventually the Pacific Ocean, though no one in the United States government had exact knowledge of what lay beyond the Mississippi River. The group maintained detailed records of everything they saw. They recorded weather, terrain, plant species, animal sightings, and signs of human presence. Lewis and Clark took special care to observe and describe unfamiliar animals such as grizzly bears and bison. They also collected things they found, like plants, seeds, rocks, and sent them back to scientists and government leaders in the eastern United States. These detailed observations would later help American scientists and mapmakers learn more about the continent. One of the key aspects of the early part of the journey was building peaceful relationships with Native American tribes. Jefferson had instructed Lewis and Clark to treat Native Americans with respect and to explain that the land now belonged to the United States. The expedition met with several tribes during the first year, including the Oto, Missouria, and Yankton Sioux. In each meeting, Lewis and Clark gave speeches, handed out medals and trade goods, and collected information about the tribe's language, customs, and leadership. These diplomatic efforts were meant to establish peaceful relations and secure safe passage through native lands. By the end of 1804, the Corps of Discovery had traveled hundreds of miles up the Missouri River. They built a winter camp called Fort Mandan near present-day North Dakota, where they stayed until spring. During this time, they gathered more information about the environment and local tribes, including the Mandan and Hidatsa. They also met Toussaint Charbonneau, a French-Canadian trader, and his wife Sacagawea, a Shoshone woman. Sacagawea would later play an important role as a guide and interpreter, especially when the expedition reached the Rocky Mountains and needed help from her people to continue westward. The Lewis and Clark expedition came to an end in September 1806, when the Corps of Discovery returned to St. Louis after more than 2 years of travel. They had reached the Pacific Ocean in late 1805, built a winter camp called Fort Clatsop near the coast, and then made the long journey back the following year. Along the way, they faced dangerous terrain, rough weather, illnesses, hunger, and complex relationships with native tribes. Despite these challenges, the expedition returned with valuable information about the geography, plant and animal life, river systems, and native peoples of the western lands. Their work gave the United States a much clearer understanding of the continent beyond the Mississippi River. The success of the expedition strengthened the idea of westward expansion and gave the government more confidence in future efforts to explore and settle new areas. Although they did not find a direct water route to the Pacific, they had achieved nearly everything President Jefferson had asked them to do. Subscribe to explore more of America's history.